You are listening to the People Centric Podcast, where we talk through the toughest challenges that people face at work and give practical advice to fixing those challenges. Thanks for joining our movement to create workplaces that are happier, healthier, aligned, and empowered by putting people at the center of all that we do.
Hello, People-Centric leaders. It's Bethany Taff, Diana Royalty, and Stephanie Anderson. Do you guys want to say hello?
Hello.
Welcome.
Hello.
And Diana, thanks for being here. We have a topic for you about hierarchy. Everybody's favorite thing, hierarchy. So we were having a conversation about what to talk about today. And this came up really in another article that we had been reading about how engagement is at a 10-year low. But one of the things that popped up in there and this conversation was about people management, which then sort of referenced hierarchy. So I'm kind of like giving you the whole trail of how we got there. But it's a topic that we hear people bring up a lot, and it's really being able to differentiate the importance of hierarchy. Some people that we talk to think hierarchy doesn't matter. They want to keep it really flat. They want everybody to have the same titles, or nobody reports to anybody, all of those things. So they really want to minimize that, just in effort to create some kind of equality or fairness. And then we've seen other organizations that place a lot of emphasis on hierarchy, to where it's very visible when you walk into the organization. You can feel it, and it's pretty black and white with that. So I think for those organizations, it's an effort to create a lot of clarity so that there's no questions, that people know exactly what they're supposed to be doing and what their role is or is not. And so I think the intentions are we're going to assume the best about both types of organizations, but we want to talk about how we think about hierarchy, and does hierarchy really matter? So that's really my first question for us is, does hierarchy actually matter?
So that's a deep question.
It is a deep question.
And I think sometimes yes. That's my immediate answer. Sometimes yes. Stephanie, what were you going to say?
I mean, I was going to kind of say the same thing. I'm like, I think it depends. I think sometimes hierarchy is helpful because it makes it more clear, like who is making certain decisions. Like as an employee, I know who is judging my performance. Like some of those things I think are generally helpful. But then, yeah, I think there's other times where it doesn't really matter. Like, does this person need to have a different chair, desk, office, title, salary, XYZ, just because they are at a different level? And, people do, and companies do weird stuff sometimes with hierarchy that I think actually makes it harder for people to be engaged at work. So
Yeah. I don't think from our team, I don't think we're anti-hierarchy at all. I think it's just figuring about what type of hierarchy is really that important. So what are the parts of hierarchy that we would advocate for?
I think one we've already mentioned a little bit is just like some structural hierarchy. And if you've worked with us before, we've probably looked at your org design and maybe even recommended maybe creating some different layers or structures, because I think that does really help everyone do a good job. A lot of times when we come into an organization and they'll be like, yeah, this department is really struggling, it's not uncommon for us to then look at the design of that department or of the organization, and that's a very flat area. And it could even exist within a taller hierarchical organization. But like, yeah, of course that manager is struggling because they have 40 direct reports. Or yeah, of course that team is struggling because there's only 5 people, but the amount of workload that's placed there and the amount of tasks they have to manage through, and what they have to execute is the work of 100 people, right? And I'm being a little facetious with the numbers, but I mean we've seen it where it's like, wow, there's 50 people that report to this one person. Or, when you look at the total org design, oh wow, 80% of the organization trees up to this person, and then the other 10 executives only have 3 direct reports. And so I think there are those moments where we are big proponents for maybe creating some more structure to help make workloads feel not only like more equitable, but also like more efficient and effective for the organization, because Don's an engineer. Sometimes we use engineering type phrases, but one that Don will often say when we talk about this is, if you have a house and you built it and there's a beam, but you built it structurally incorrectly, so there's too much weight on that beam and that beam breaks, you don't blame the beam in that moment, right? The beam just could only carry what it carries. But what we often see in organizations is when there's like the metaphorically too much weight on one beam, one person's managing too many people or too many departments or tasks or things, we tend to blame the person instead of maybe the structure or the hierarchy that might have benefited them, might have benefited the company.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think hierarchy is important for just like reigning in chaos, right? Like you have to know who's in charge. We all like to be in charge. We all like to have autonomy. It's not the like micromanagement of it. It's the accountability part, right? Like I need to know what my expectations are, and I need to know I'm doing good on those expectations, and I need to know that someone's going to hold me accountable to them, right? Like that basic accountability part, I think is really necessary for hierarchy and really helps with the clarity of work in those situations. So like I think hierarchy is important.
Definitely. Yeah, I think those are all really good points. Is you have to have your house built the right way. You have to have other structural supports in place to be able to help manage it. You have to be able to have people who can hold other employees accountable so that things get done and so that we're doing things in the right way and all of that. Also we think about like you need somebody who's kind of steering the ship if we're talking at the very top level, and then within each department, right? Like you need somebody who's casting a vision for the organization, or there's going to be 10 different visions for the direction that you go, and then you just can't be effective as an organization. So being able to have somebody who's casting sort of a singular vision and saying like, hey, this is where we're going, and then having leaders who can help support that vision. But otherwise, if you don't have somebody who is established to do that, then it's going to be really chaotic. To your point, Diana, I think it's also the decision making, right? To that point, is being able to say, do we have clarity on who's making decisions across the organization and who's responsible for making those kinds of decisions? That's really hard to do in a flat organization. There's going to be lots of conflict with that if you don't have that clarified. So I think those are the elements that we would probably advocate for when it comes to hierarchy. Is there anything we missed on why we think hierarchy is important?
I think I'm going to put this out there. I think people like to have someone that they report to. I think people like to know who they go to with problems, who they talk to things about, who's going to develop them, who's going to give them a path. I think having one person that kind of knows you and knows what's going on and gives you that direction is really helpful. When you have, I think we've all been in situations where you've had like 3 or 4 bosses or 3 or 4 people you report to, and like that just gets a little crazy. And so I think the good hierarchy also helps clarity around expectation and development and those sorts of things. So I think, hierarchy is important. We're saying it
is important. Yeah. But we also have seen, I think, to our earlier conversation, we have also seen hierarchy that's not so great. And so I think this is where people in these kinds of examples, that maybe people struggle with it, and we would probably challenge. And some of them, to be honest, when we look at it, we're like, oh gosh, it's weird that we still have organizations that function like this. This if we're just speaking really honestly. But what are the parts that you all would challenge? What parts of hierarchy would you challenge? And maybe what are some examples of those that we've seen?
I think there are moments where hierarchy starts to become a little divisive, and we start to think of the managers or the leaders as above or better than or worth more or contributing more than frontline staff.
Yeah.
And that's where it starts to feel yucky for me. That's where I start to be like, oh, what are we doing? Right? Because just because you have a manager title, just because you have a supervisor title, just because you have some sort of leadership does not mean that you are contributing more, that you're more valuable, that you are a better person, that you are smarter. It means none of those things. And I think that there is some cultures and some workplaces that start to put that out there for their employees. Like, well, if the manager is smarter than you or better than you or contributing more than you. And I think when we start to see those types of themes creep in, that's where our team is like, yuck, no.
Yeah, when I start hearing about like special privileges that leaders get that other people don't, and we're not talking about like, hey, now you need this information that other people don't have access to, right? Which I think would be in a healthy form of hierarchy. Yeah, your CEO or top leader is going to have access to different information than your frontline team. But I think, yeah, when it starts coming to like other special privileges or weird things, or like we've even seen stuff like uniform changes depending on which level you're at that really like are unnecessary or make no sense just because they're a manager, you not, or you know, higher and or lower cubicle walls just based on titles, changes maybe in certain benefits, things that really are not like commiserate with effort or skill. Just because you're at this level now, you get this thing that other people don't. Because to your point, Diana, it's like just because you're a leader or manager doesn't mean you're contributing more just by the nature of your title or position than other people are in the company. And I think this is also where we'll tend to see frontline people even start disengaging in things if it just feels like we're really just talking about power and not hierarchy, or privilege and not hierarchy. It's a focus on what I get that you do not, because of my title, because of where I'm at. And I know I'm also like dancing us toward a hot button like thing about like, should leaders and CEOs get paid more than other people? And do they really do more work than the average bear, and those type of things? And should they be rewarded and given special things and compensated? Should they get the company car? Should they get the parking spot? Should they get the big office? And without taking us totally there, I mean, we're not saying yes or no on that necessarily, but I think you really have to be careful with those things and know why you're doing it. And don't just do it because other companies are doing it. It's what's been done at your company in the past. Like, have a strong why for why these people get higher cubicle walls or bigger offices or any kind of special privilege or benefit or compensation. Be really, really clear about why. And it's got to be a logical reason, because otherwise you're just contributing to really an unequal and unfair power dynamic. And you're creating more distance between levels of leadership, and almost in some ways encouraging people to not totally play fair or to use their influence appropriately. And like Dana said, it starts making it feel like some people are more important here than other people, or they're a bigger deal than you are, or XYZ, and that's where it starts feeling really yucky.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that to that, I'm like, we're not necessarily saying if you're the CEO of an organization that you shouldn't have your own office. We're not saying that. We're just saying like be thoughtful about maybe your office space. And are we creating visual markers that aren't unnecessary? If you're the CEO, You probably do. You probably do need some space. Not every organization is like that. Our office space is open. Dawn sits right in line with all the rest of us, right? But we also recognize that there are organizations where they have to hold more sensitive information depending on the role that you're in, whether that's CEO or HR, right? Like it depends on what your role is within the organization and why that's important. So I think it's understanding the why behind certain things. We talked about, I think, even like dress code, right? Of potentially saying like there might be uniform changes, or maybe it's not an actual written code, dress code. It's that we have sort of adopted this unspoken policy about how we should be dressing depending on what role we are within the organization, and just being mindful of those things. Of course, there's organizations that, let's say, the military. I think that's an obvious one where you think about like uniform changes depending on the position we're in. I'm not out for the military right now. Then I think that they probably have some good reasons for making those adjustments to make it really visibly clear who's in charge, especially in chaotic situations where they need to know who the leader is. I think there are moments for those things, and people earn certain awards and benefits and things like that where they put hard work into it, and so we honor people in that way, right? So I think that there's moments. I think it's just understanding like the why behind why we're making some of those decisions and creating visual markers or benefits or things like that for hierarchy.
Yeah,
Diane.
to tag on to that, what you were talking about with the dress code, I heard from someone the other day who was like, oh, our managers wear khaki pants and our floor staff wear black pants.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, why? Like, does
Yeah.
the floor staff get dirty? Like, does dirt show up on their pants so they just wear black pants, and like the managers don't have to do the grungy work so they wear khaki? Like, is that the thing? And they were like, no. One day a manager wore black pants and their leader said like, oh, we don't wear black pants. We wear khaki pants. What are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, I don't know. I just decided to wear black pants today. And the leader was like, no. We wear khaki pants to separate us from the floor workers. And they were kind of like, well, that's fine. Is that literally our dress code? And like, is this a uniform thing that I didn't know about? And he was like, no, it's just us versus them, And that kind of language just feels unnecessarily divisive and not fair and honestly gross. Like I was not a fan of that conversation. And I think that when people start doing things to intentionally divide yourself from others, I think that's when it starts to become a problem. There's no reason to divide yourself that way.
Yeah.
Granted, like you were saying, there are spaces for that, right? In hospitals, I've seen
Totally.
Nurses wear blue scrubs and pharmacists wear green scrubs. I think that's totally fine. That delineates who is able to do what in a crisis.
Yes.
I think that's a little different. But the simple like I'm gonna wear a suit and you're gonna wear a t-shirt because I'm the boss.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like a suit will assert power over you or show that I am bigger or better than you. I think that's yucky.
Yeah.
That's not fun.
Yeah, agreed. I was thinking hospitals too. That's another, it's a great example because it's in an operating room. Like you need to know who the doctor is versus who the nurse is versus, whoever else is in there, right?
Whoever
like
else.
it just helps create clarity on the roles in those moments where we don't need to be able to we can't have a whole conversation about it, right?
Totally. Yeah. This person's bleeding.
Yeah.
We need to know who can work on them. Yeah.
Absolutely. So anything else, Diana, that we haven't touched on in terms of hierarchy, what matters, what doesn't matter?
I think Stephanie started to touch on like the hot button. How much do people get paid and what does that look like? And I think the reality is that yes, leaders are going to get paid a little bit more because they're supervising and they're holding people accountable and they have, information that not everybody gets to have. And there's a reward to that. And there's a, compensation for that.
Mm.
But I would maybe challenge leaders who feel like they deserve a lot more than their people.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think that's where it starts to get a little weird. Like, why do Don and I would never say I deserve 300% more than what Bethany gets, because Bethany's putting in very similar work that we're putting in. So we just don't do it that way in our organization. And I when I talk to other leaders, I remind them of that too, right? It's not necessary to be that far removed from
how big of a jump. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's especially when you know that you have people on your team who are struggling on the front lines based on what you're paying, and there's no issue at the very top level, right? So it's hard, especially the bigger your organization gets. I think that's harder, but still something to keep in mind. So
yeah. Anyway, I think in all of this conversation, it is create hierarchy that helps with clarity. Don't create hierarchy that creates dissension and dichotomy. I think that's what we're really getting at.
That's right. Yeah. So hierarchy is important. We do advocate for it, and just be mindful about your influence and how you want hierarchy to show up within your organization, and make sure that it's healthy. So hopefully this was a helpful conversation and sort of figuring out the distinction between those two things and why it matters within your unique company or organization. So if you have questions about it, we'd love to talk to you. If you heard this and you were like, oh, you didn't talk about this, and this is how it shows up within our organization, is that it feels weird, or it feels, I haven't thought about it. This is what we do, but is this fine, or is this unhelpful to our people? And so we're always open for those kinds of questions. Please reach out to us. You'll find out how to do that in our outro here. But thanks for taking some time to listen to us today, and we'll talk to you next time.
Thank you for listening to the People Centric Podcast. We are so grateful for you joining us every week. If you like this content, please like and subscribe. Also, feel free to share on your social media with everyone that you know. It really does help us. If you would like to contact us, I have put our information in the show notes. Please reach out anytime. We love hearing from you. We will be back next week with a new topic. Until then, be well and lead well.